will get in here shortly. All right. So welcome to Backbones, Women's and SCI Health Talks. This program is funded by the Christopher Reeve Foundation. My name is Emily Lacey, and I am the program coordinator. Tonight's webinar is being recorded and will be sent to everyone who registered via email and uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you can also find our past recordings. Captioning is available by clicking on the live transcript button in the Zoom screen. If you are new to Backbones, our organization is committed to helping people with spinal cord injuries and similar disabilities find connection and community. We do this by we do this by hosting events both in person and virtually, facilitating one-on-one peer support and providing resources to individuals with spinal cord injuries and their families when they're trying to navigate life post-injury. I encourage you to check out our website at www.backbonesonline.com to find more information about our programs. We are a community-led program that seeks to bring awareness and education about women's health in the context of SCI. Our topics and format are the results of 2 community listening sessions, where women with SCI from across the country provided insights. To continue to be community-led and directed, we will send an email tomorrow with a very short survey, as well as a copy of this webinar, which you may share freely. The survey is 3 to 5 questions and should only take a few minutes to complete. We thank you in advance for filling it out. In addition to this recorded webinar, we also provide a private, only for women with SCI, small discussion groups to unpack the conversation from tonight and share personal experiences and support. If you are interested in the small groups, please go to our website at backbonesonline.com and click the program tab. The link will also be dropped in the chat shortly. I will introduce our amazing guest speaker here shortly. We will have a 10 to 15 minute Q&A at the end of the webinar. You are welcome to submit questions for our speaker through the Q&A option or send them directly in the chat. I will read the questions that are submitted. If at any point you would like Jenna to clarify something, please use the raise your hand option. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Jenna Hardy-Serena. She is an associate marriage and family therapist based out of Southern California. After working for over a decade helping people with physical rehabilitation, oh my God, I struggle with that word, post SCI and other neuromuscular conditions, Jenna witnessed major gap in the holistic care for people living with chronic disabilities and health conditions, especially when it came to addressing the mental and emotional aspects of these diagnoses. Wanting to do more, Jenna returned to school and achieved her master's degree in clinical psychology. Today, she works in private practice, providing therapy services to help individuals and family through tough conversations to empower them to say no to giving up and help them discover their true potential for fulfilling life after diagnosis. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Jenna. I will now hand the webinar over to you.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so well, thanks everybody for coming. I am really excited to talk about this topic, but also too, I want to just state the obvious that this is a really heavy topic and it can be a pretty intense topic, especially if you are currently maybe experiencing something that is maybe giving flavors of abuse or are a survivor of abuse. So I want to kind of state my intention, which is really, I would like to provide education, first of all, on what is abuse, what categorizes abuse, to understanding what abuse can look like and feel like, and then to empower you to understand if you are in a situation that might be potentially dangerous, how you would go about escaping a situation or go about getting yourself help to recover from that situation. So at the very end of this slide, I have a kind of very peaceful, tranquil background so we can kind of take a deep breath and move into the questions that you guys may have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and move on. So once again, my name is Jenna Hardy-Serena. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. I'm in private practice right now with Be Authentic Family Therapy Services. My background before becoming a mental health clinician was that I was a paralysis recovery specialist at the Perfect Step Paralysis Recovery Centers here in Pomona, California. And for my decade of helping people rehabilitate from different type of neurological conditions, I saw a major gap in holistic care and kind of the major impacts that mental health was having on people's recovery, but was not being addressed in inpatient or outpatient. So that's why I chose to switch over to the mental health side and start working with this community and providing them services that they desperately needed. I've listed my contact information below, Jenna at beauthenticfamilytherapy.com as my email, my phone number there. And then of course you can follow me on Instagram. I'm under the medical MFT. And I like to post some what I find to be helpful or interesting things occasionally on Instagram. So this is a really great quote that I want to share. And actually my little screen's over it, so I'm going to try to read it. If you are in a relationship with someone where you tiptoe around their easily triggered ego, you have to be careful how you speak to them when discussing conflict because they tend to get easily offended and will blame it on you. When you're in a relationship with someone like this, it can suck your emotional cup dry because you both end up so focused on making sure that they're okay that you often forget about checking in to seeing if you're okay. I love this quote because so often, when we find ourselves in abusive relationships, it's not overtly obvious and it kind of just slowly happens over time. And it might not be noticeable at first. And then all of a sudden you're kind of left with the shell of yourself and kind of wondering like, wait, how did I get here? And I feel so yucky. But wait, I've been with this person for so long. And so it can be really, really confusing. And so kind of later down in this slide with you guys, I'll be talking about maybe some different feelings or emotions that will come up for somebody who is potentially in an abusive situation. Defining abuse. So I put on here that there are 8 different types of abuse that I would like to make sure that we make clear about today. So one being physical. This is a type of abuse that many people think of when they hear the word abuse. It can include punching, hitting, slapping, kicking, strangling, or physically restraining a partner against their will. It can also include driving recklessly or invading someone's physical space, and in any other way making someone feel physically unsafe. Giving inappropriate medication is also considered a form of physical abuse. I have a client right now who was describing to me that with her making comments to her spouse that she wanted to leave the relationship because of the abusive nature of it. They were driving somewhere and he was threatening to kill them both by driving them off the road. And really for her at this point, she had been so used to these threats, she didn't realize that this was unusual or potentially very, very dangerous. And also too, I want to put in there too that sometimes too, the partners can make a lot of threats with physical safety in the sense of their physical safety as well. So once again, saying, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself and stuff like that. So that's all kind of a part of this kind of psychological abuse of power and control we're going to talk about. Sexual abuse. This can include both physical and non-physical components. It can involve rape or other forced sexual acts, or withholding or using sex as a weapon. An abusive partner might also use sex as a means to judge their partner and to assign value to them. In basically other words, criticizing or saying that somebody isn't good enough at sex or that sex is the only thing they're good for. Because sex, and especially sex in women, can be so loaded with emotional and cultural implications, there are a number of ways that the feeling around it can be uniquely used for power and control. I thought this was really interesting. that it wasn't until 1993 that marital rape was illegal in all 50 states. So some people may still assume that sex is something a partner is entitled to and not recognize it as a larger pattern of power and control. I thought that was really important to put in there because it just shows how recent cultural expectations around sex, and especially sex and women in marriage, and the power dynamic of women in those situations are finally being recognized. It is, to me, a little alarming that it was, it took till 1993 to have something like that established. And there was already kind of this preconceived notion that just because you're married to somebody, they have the right to your body. And so I thought that was important to put in here because I feel like culturally too, we can kind of still get lost up in that. So these you might see on websites are categorized in actually to two different types of abuses, but really to me, they kind of hold hands and they're all the same. So I grouped them as one, which is verbal, emotional, or mental or psychological abuse. Mental or psychological abuse happens when one partner, through a series of actions or words, wears away at another sense of mental well-being and health. It also often involves making the victim doubt their own sanity, leveraging the abuser into more power and control. The really key part here, which I often hear from some women that I work with who are in abusive relationships, is the doubt their own sanity. They kind of start to get the sense of, they almost like doubt their judgment. It's like, wait, I know this feels wrong, but they're saying it's not, and maybe I'm wrong. And this is a really slow breakdown that happens over time. So common examples of this is calling someone names or putting them down. I unfortunately see this a lot in burnt out caregivers. Is the name calling and shaming. So caregivers are also a part of this conversation as well, not just domestic partners. Isolating or ignoring, so the silent treatment. Threatening to remove benefits, services, medication, treatment, etc. Threatening to destroy pets or personal belongings. Removing aids such as a wheelchair or a communication device. Threatening to send the person to an institution. That last one also is something that I commonly see with burnout caregivers. So just something, once again, to be aware of. I want to bring back in that kind of example of the one client, when she finally had gotten the courage to tell the partner she wanted to end the relationship and leave. He not only kind of started engaging in some, stalking situations, but when she continued to basically break away from his power and control, he would try to gain her back by threatening that he was going to kill himself, and that when he did it, it was going to be all of her fault, and so on and so forth. And as you can imagine, this kind of guilt tripping into being into a relationship with somebody can be extremely distressing. But I just want to make sure I use those examples because they are common. Financial and economic. This is when somebody's controlling another person's finances without permission. This is also a precarious one too, with not only maybe partners who are designated as caregivers or hired caregivers. This is something that as a therapist, I'm kind of always keeping my ear open for. So if you're getting any type of disability benefits or, whatnot, common examples that you kind of just want to be aware of are withholding money for basic necessities such as food, clothing, medication, and transportation. Preventing someone from getting to work or denying access to employment altogether. Depriving someone of financial benefits, taking money needed for food and shelter and gambling it away, using it to buy drugs and alcohol for the person who's caring for that person. A lot of times here, I'll kind of hear lingerings of people trying to justify to maybe somebody with a disability whether they're caregiving for them or in a domestic partnership with them, that, you know, I do all of this for you, right? I have to do this because you physically can't. And so you basically, you owe me. You know, you owe me money. You owe to buy me this thing. You know, actually should get this paycheck, not you. So once again, kind of keeping that in the back of your minds. Another type of abuse is neglect. This happens when a caregiver does not meet the needs of the people who are dependent on the care of someone else to get their basic needs met. A caregiver can be someone who is paid to help or a family member. Neglect may involve not giving food to somebody, care, or necessary medication. This is a really, really easy one, I feel like, that can be kind of overlooked. There was a time when I was very new to working in the paralysis recovery world and the physical health side. And it can be something as simple as, you know, I had one client who depended on the care of a hired caregiver, and I started to notice that their hygiene was diminishing pretty badly. And it got to the point where they got a pretty intense pressure sore that hospitalized them. So, you know, sometimes people would think like, oh, like kind of like messy, disheveled hair, or, you know, they maybe have kind of a funny smell, maybe not that big of a deal to be paying attention to, but it is a really, really big deal. It's really, to me, kind of warning signs of caregiver burnout. So common examples of this can be not providing enough to eat or drink, not providing appropriate supervision, not providing enough heat, electricity, not providing appropriate personal care, removing dentures, glasses, or hearing aids, allowing the person to develop skin conditions or pressure sores, leaving the person's medical problems untreated. And then I added these because this is really relevant to anybody living with a spinal cord injury or disability. Systemic abuse. Systemic abuse refers to the practice that take away a person's independence and dignity. Systemic abuse happens in settings where other people are making decisions for the person who has a disability. Government bodies and bureaucrats can also be involved in systemic abuse. And then institutional abuse. This is a form of systemic abuse. In institutional settings, power imbalances often exist between service providers and the people that they serve. Research has shown that people with disabilities who live in institutions are more likely to experience abuse than those who live in the community. This is really important. This is something that is happening every day, all day, in all places. Everything from buildings who have maybe government regulations to be accessible that are not and not being regulated, so then people can't access them, all the way to doctors and medical care teams and providers. And so this is definitely something that's important, and also to, you know, to be an awareness of. Specific concerns for spinal cord injury or disability. One thing I want to mention are protected classes, and one of them is dependent adults. So as a therapist, I'm what's called a mandated reporter, meaning that it's my job to protect protected classes in my office. Police officers, teachers, anybody who's kind of in public service is a mandated reporter. And the protected classes are children, so anybody under the age of 18, elderly adults, anybody 65 and up, and also the dependent adults, and dependent adults being anybody who depends on somebody else to meet the basic needs of their care. And so I think this is also important to bring up because if you're 18 or older and you are living with some sort of disability that requires the care of somebody else, you are a protected class. You know, the law and people in institutions are in place to make sure that you get your needs met and nobody's taking advantage of that. I'm going to talk about a little bit later about how you can report dependent adult abuse. But a dependent adult abuse can be any of the things that I just mentioned from the 8 abuses before. And I also, a specific concern is we are dependent on our caregivers and their mental health. It is tragic that we do not provide not only our SCI disability community the mental health resources automatically, but we do not provide caregivers enough support either, whether that is a family member or somebody who is paid to do the work. Being a caregiver is a really rewarding, but can be a very heavy, strenuous job, as some of us know. And the education and resources around giving them appropriate mental health access so that they can do their job well is not there. So caregiver burnout is very real, and caregiver burnout is one of the leading causes to abuse. So I just want to point that out as it really pertains to this population, and whoever is caring for you, potentially their mental health is just as significant as yours. And then some barriers to self-reported abuse. So why do women, especially women with spinal cord injuries or disabilities, maybe not report that they're experiencing some sort of abuse? One is fear, unable to escape from your abuser's control, or is threatening to withdraw your services that you so desperately need. Economic dependence. You may lack the financial stability or employment skills to support yourselves or be on your own. And so obviously that's really unnerving. Isolation. Some people living with a spinal cord injury or disability have little contact of support outside of their caregivers. And sometimes their caregivers are the main people that they're around 24/7. So lack of social supports is really, really hard. And then of course, lack of access. Often do not have access to appropriate support services, and literally, the physical accessibility to them, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more down on our slides. Recognizing signs of abuse. I love this quote. Lies don't end relationships, the truth does. I think that speaks for itself. So this is the abuse cycle. And I think this is really important to bring up because it explains the kind of complex dynamic of the high tension to maybe abusive situation to the immediate relief, and then almost like this fake repair that kind of holds people in these power and control dynamic relationships. So basically it starts with tension. Stress grows from whatever the situations are, from normal stresses of daily life, especially in times of COVID right now. And this, starts to build tension for the abuser to try to gain more power and control. Once again, this abuse is all about being in control. And so then over time, and this can happen over a couple weeks to a couple months, it really kind of just depends. The tension builds and builds and builds. And then all of a sudden you have an abusive incident. Normally when somebody encounters their first abusive incident, it's not outrightly abusive. We're used to seeing in movies and TV, on TV shows, when somebody's coming in abused, they have a black eye or bruises on their body. And it doesn't normally just start that way. It starts very slowly. I had another client who came in who was sharing that, first the relationship, like most of them do, started out very verbally abusive, name calling, yelling and screaming and making threats. And then all of a sudden one day they were having stress in the relationship, and their partner grabbed a pillow and threw it at their face. And, you can start to make excuses there, right? Oh, well, it's just a pillow. And I know he didn't mean to hurt me. And obviously, he could have grabbed a hard object to throw at my face, but he grabbed the pillow. He was just frustrated, blah, 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 blah. And then, next time a tension occurs, all of a sudden, I was laying on the bed and he grabbed my leg and he threw my leg. And then the next time it occurs, and then it just very slowly over a period of months, like I said, or years, it builds from a tiny little isolated, maybe unnoticeable abusive situation to something that's really full scale and potentially dangerous. So the abusive incident occurs, and this includes anger, intimidation, threats, and other forms of abuse, because there's a recognition that what they are doing is wrong. But the need for power and control is so intense that they know that by doing this, they could be in trouble. And so they make threats or intimidate you. Well, if you tell anybody that I did this, I'm going to leave your wheelchair outside and then you can't leave, or I'm leaving, or I'm not giving you your medications, I'm taking them with me, right? So they start to use intimidation and threats to make you comply to their need for sense of control. And then they do the big act and it's terrible. And, all of a sudden the abuser goes, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. They start to apologize. We call this the honeymoon phase. They start to make up. I'm so sorry. They actually show remorse, which can make you feel really confused, because it's like, wait a second, 2 minutes ago, you were lunging at me and threatening me. And now all of a sudden, you've apologized. So it can start to make you go, oh gosh, they just were really angry and they didn't mean that. And look, they really love me. They recognize what they did. They're not going to do it again. So they usually beg for forgiveness because they, once they kind of come down and they feel a new sense of power and control again over the relationship, they have to kind of repair and reconcile so they can tolerate not only themselves, but make sure that you're not going to go away. They may shower you with love and affection. This same client that I was showing the example of, first it started with the pillow, then throwing the leg. She would say that he would buy her anything that she wanted. Very frequently. So he would just shower her with gifts. And then they make these kind of empty promises that will never happen again. And just once again, really buying you to kind of come in and stay. Then there's calm. The relationship has, repaired and has restored to a state of calm. There's kind of this false sense of being reconnected. And the abuser continues to kind of, for lack of a better term, wine and dine you, show their best sense of self, their best side of self, to really kind of convince you to be with them. Positive gestures and, this person that I've always wanted to be with, here they are and look how well they're treating me. And right. And so then that can come off sincere. And then life happens and then the tension builds again. And then we go back into the cycle again. So it's hard to see when you're in the middle of it. And this is really kind of, I was hoping using the examples before where I was talking about the client where it started with the pillow throw, then the leg shoving, and then the threatening to, following and stalking her to the gym, and so on and so forth. And then the repair and the promises and you do really love and care about this person. When you're in the middle of that, it's so hard to see out of it. And so I wanted to make a representation of many things that you might be feeling if you are in an abusive relationship, if you can't actually see for yourself that you are in it, or you feel confused or maybe a little disoriented or making excuses for the relationship because you feel kind of crazy. It's like, wait a second, like he's so, or he or she's so wonderful over here and now they're not, and so one of the things you can be feeling is you're unhappy in the relationship, but fear the alternatives of leaving the relationship. Another big one is to gain more power of control. The partner might start to try to kind of shun you away from family and friends. So you might start ditching friends and sidelining your family to please your partner. So they might be pointing out bad attributes about your friends or family, and that's why you shouldn't be hanging out with them, and this is why they make me mad, and so on and so forth. So they try to isolate you so you don't really have that contact and support of other people to go, hey, wait a second, like there's something funny going on here. You start to engage in substance use. This is, as a coping mechanism. If you feel lots of anxiety and kind of out of control, a way of being able to cope with that can be substance use. Consistently neglecting your own needs for the sake of theirs. Sleep disturbance, excessive weight gain or loss. You would rather live in the current state of chaos than be alone. This is a really, really big one that I hear very, very often, because the risk of being alone outweighs the risk of sometimes being in the relationship, or it's perceived to be that way. And we'll go into the next part about seeking safety and how you can counterbalance that. You think you deserve the treatment, over time, the abuse and the emotional wear and tear and the verbal abuse and the attacks on personality characters and they make you start to question your own sanity. It's really a self-esteem reducer, and you start to lose sight of your judgment, and is your judgment accurate? And so then you start to feel like a terrible person. Look, I'm making them so mad, it must be something I'm doing. And they kind of revalidate that by telling you that through the verbal abuse. Make a lot of sacrifices to please the other person, but it's not reciprocated. So sometimes too, I find a lot of my women who are in abusive relationships can't see that they're sacrificing almost every moment of their day, and they're kind of consumed with every move they make to make sure that the other person is happy and content, to kind of minimize the anxiety. But nobody's trying to comfort them or help them or minimize their anxiety. Bite your tongue and repress your feelings to keep the peace. Low self-esteem, feeling responsible and take blame for something they did. Oh gosh, I said that they were being mean, or I told them I didn't want to go with them, and that hurt their feelings. So that's why they threw the whatever at me. It was something I did. Try to rescue them from themselves. This is another big one. Not all relationships at the very beginning, when they start to form, are abusive. Like I said, at the very beginning, they kind of slowly happen over time. And so, you love this person and you care about them and you've seen good sides of them. And gosh, I know they have this side of them, but if I can do all these things right and make them happy, then we can be happy, right? So we start to make excuses and try to rescue them, when we all know that we can't rescue or save anybody. They have to be willing to fix or help or save themselves. Feeling guilty when you stand up for yourself. Believe nobody else could ever want to be with you. That's another really big one. And another one I hear a lot through the verbal abuse, especially women living with disabilities or spinal cord injuries. And when the spouse or the partner is a caregiver, they use that disability against them like it's something wrong and it's a burden. And that, you're lucky that I'm basically tolerating this. And that one is a really, really, really easy trap to fall in. And once again, going down the road, this is where seeking out your own therapy and therapists is really important to help you flush through some of those really difficult feelings they could be making you feel, or accusations that they're making about your injury. Self-destructive behavior, self-harming, cutting, doing anything where you're intentionally putting yourself in harm's way. Critiquing yourself through your abuser's eyes, ignoring your own instincts, excessive crying spells, avoidance of specific settings, change your behavior in response to guilt. Your abuser says, I can't live without you, so you stay. It was kind of like that example that I had shared with one of my clients who he was threatening to kill himself if she left. Okay. And now, okay, so here we are. Jenna's been talking, and there's some things in here that feel really, really resonate with me in my situation or somebody that I know. And it's really scary and it sounds really dangerous. And so, what do we do now? What would be my next steps? So let's talk about that. So because I imagine the people watching this are from all over the United States, I'm based here in California. And so the resources are going to be very wide and diverse depending upon the state and the county and the city that you live in. So I just want to make it not confusing and narrow it down to be something very, very simple. And the National Domestic Violence Hotline and their website is amazing. So the website's thehotline.org. And then of course, here's their number. I'll keep this slide up for a little bit while I talk. I love their website. They have, well, one, they show that extensive amount of wealth and knowledge that they have in this area. It's also a national hotline, so you really can call from anywhere and they can direct you to the right places. When you go to this website, what I really love about them, the first thing that pops up before you even enter onto their website is a cautionary disclaimer for them, basically saying, hey, look, are you aware that your abusers can track your online searches? And if you believe that your abuser is tracking your online searches, this is how you clear your search history, and we want you to call this number for us to help you. So they really have thought of everything and every potential scenario for anybody who's seeking help through them. When you go on to the website, it's very easy to use. They make it very clear. You can, one, just call them and get somebody live on the phone to help you walk through your particular situation. They also have online chatting that you can talk to somebody online to walk through. They also have a zip code search of domestic violence shelters in your area. So you can type in your zip code and they'll have a whole bunch and a list to pop up of different numbers that you can call. They also have this component called safety planning. And so they have laid it all out there for you and they take you step by step through creating a safety plan. I didn't do it on here because it's long and extensive, and I think it's well done and more organized on this website. But first thing to do is to identify and connect with support. If you believe you're in an abusive situation and you need to leave for safety purposes, the first thing you need to do is establish support. So that can be friends or family. And if you don't have friends or family and you're really in kind of a precarious situation, these hotlines, this is what they do for a living. They are also your support system. I want to be very, very clear about that. Especially if you feel nervous about telling friends and family. Making a safety plan. The importance of the safety plan and how it's executed is going to be the step that will give a victim the confidence to actually leave. So the safety plan is really important. And once again, that's why I had suggested this website, because they do a really phenomenal job of walking you through building a safety plan. So after you establish a safety plan, you kind of have an idea of where you would go, what you would do, how you would leave, so on and so forth. Oh, that brings up something for me. Also, they have connections to different types of transportation. So if you need transportation or help with transportation to get from your situation to a shelter, they have connections there as well. You can specifically search for transportation services in your area. Just want to throw that out there. Plan for action. So you will kind of sit down with family, friends, or the domestic shelter and plan for a day and time and execute the safety plan. I want to be very clear that this is not as easy as simply rolling or walking away. This is basically a very complex situation, and it takes a lot of courage to leave. When a survivor leaves their abusive relationship, they basically threaten the power and control of their partner or caregiver and what they've established over the agency of the survivor. And they could threaten to retaliate. So as a result, leaving is the most dangerous time period for survivors of abuse. And this is why it's complicated. And this is why sometimes people stay longer in abusive relationships than what they want to. So I had to do some research because I knew I was going to be talking to people from across the United States. And, I'm here in Pomona, California, and I know my local DV shelters, and I could call them for any one of my clients to make sure that they have accessibilities and resources for people with disabilities, and for women with disabilities. But what about the rest of you guys out there from wherever you are? So I called my local DV shelter and I said, hey, look, I'm doing this presentation. I just need to understand, I have a bunch of women coming on who are living with some type of disability, and are shelters accessible? I mean, this is a really big deal. And so she was fabulous and spent a lot of time with me on the phone, but she basically had talked about this is House of Ruth in Pomona, California. And she had talked about how at their particular location, they have a specific room that is not attached to the DV shelter itself, and it has its own entrance and exit. And I was telling her sometimes how, the person who might need, the caregiver could be the abuser, but now they need care. So how does that work? And so she said that at their particular location, they have an extra room with its own entrance and exit where that person can schedule to meet with a friend or a family member or whoever, social worker, whatnot, to come in and get access to the care that they need throughout the day. And the shelter would organize that with you. She said, obviously she can't speak for the shelters across in the United States, but she wanted me to deliver a very important message to you guys, which is, domestic violence shelters, although separate entities, usually a handful of them in the same area have a program that they share. And that program says random things such as, let's say she gets an influx of women needing shelter, and they have no more beds to provide. So she can go online to this program and go, oh, the shelter over here has 3 beds available. Oh, blah, blah, blah. These people over here have this available. But she said, more importantly, we talk the shelters all the time. And we all have encountered really complicated situations, and no situation is too complicated for us to figure out. And she said, so if we don't have something in particular that client needs, then we connect with all of our community DV shelters and we come up with a plan who can best shelter and support this person with their particular needs. And so the message she wanted me to deliver to you is that just call. Let us handle it. Let us work through it. This is what we do for a professional living. Just give us a call and we will help you work through it. I wanted to bring this up real quick because this is a new phenomenon. This actually just happened to one of my clients, and I think it's really, really important. I don't know if you've heard, but Apple came out with this thing called an AirTag. And it's this like little device you can stick on your phone or something so that you can keep track of things that you tend to lose. Well, it's now being used for stalkers or abusers to keep track of people. I just had a client discover that she had an AirTag on her car from an abusive relationship she was trying to get out of. And so on my Instagram, I write a little bit more about it, but basically, long story short, I think it's really important that you're in the know. People can drop these in your purses and to track you and where you're going. The AirTags, when you're moving, they make beeping sounds. So if you hear any unfamiliar beeping happening, it says it beeps every two to 3 times an hour, I guess they said on their website, when it's in motion. If you have an Apple phone, your Apple phone will immediately notify you that an unknown AirTag is tracking your location, so you can be aware. If you don't have an iPhone, Apple has made an app for Android, and I forget the name of it right now, but it's on my Instagram. It's called Tracking Detective, I think. And so that you can be scanning your location to make sure there's no tracking devices around you. How to report dependent adult abuse. So if you would like to report for yourself or somebody that you know, so this is going to be different for every state and every county. So if you've been witness to the abuse of a dependent adult, you can call your local dependent adult protective services. It just takes a Google, just Google dependent adult protective services in my area, and we'll give you the phone number to your local dependent adult protective services hotline. Once again, dependent adult means a person 18 years or older who's unable to protect the person's own interests or unable to adequately perform or obtain services necessary to meet essential human needs as a result of physical or mental condition which requires assistance from another or is defined by the department rule. Caretaker means a related or non-related person who has the responsibility for that protection, care, and custody of the dependent adult as a result of assuming the responsibility voluntarily by contract, through employment, or by the order of a court. Healing wounds. Okay, so you've gotten out of the bad situation and you're safe, and now what? I love this quote. I learned that I'd never be free from pain, but I could be free from the fear of pain, and that was enough. The fire of the pain won't consume me. I can burn and burn and live. I can live on fire. I am fireproof. Second, I can use pain to become. This is the last part of my slide. Stages of recovery and what they might look like. I am biased, but I have an educated bias. I really believe it's so important at this point to get yourself some sort of therapist because of the complexities of being in an abusive situation. It takes, I believe, a trained professional to help kind of sparse that out and break it down to allow somebody to really heal through that. So some of the stages that you would work through potentially with a therapist are the phase 1, safety and stabilization. Learning to feel safe again in your body and in relationship with others, learning to regulate emotions. It can be when you're on high stress all the time in a relationship, it can be so dysregulating that you don't have a normal sense of calm. And learning to let go of self-blame. That's a big one. Phase 2 being remembrance and mourning. Process the trauma in a safe care of a professional mental health clinician. Making meaning of the madness, which is so important. So you kind of can get rid of the feeling like, am I crazy? Am I losing it? Mourning losses, give yourself space to grieve. Phase 3 being reconnection and integration. Understanding that the trauma is no longer a defining principle in your life. Redefine yourself and redefine yourself in the context of meaningful relationships. Create new sense of self. And create a new future. Excuse me. So I want to just play this video real quick. If it will play. And give ourselves a second to, let's see. Take a deep breath because that was really heavy conversation. And so for this minute, if you guys can just take a big inhale with me, and exhale, sigh. Let's just take a moment to listen to the sounds, watch the pretty landscape, and know that we're safe and we're just getting information to empower us in our circumstances. And one more deep breath. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to stop my share and allow for any questions.
Thank you, Jenna. That was wonderful. It was so informative. All right. So at this point, anyone can submit questions on the Q&A or in the chat feature. I did see in the chat earlier, Jenna, when you were talking about the little airdrops.
Yeah.
What about detecting cameras placed on your home? Yeah.
Yes. So Good question. I think the question's asking, what do you do, or how do you, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, how do you go about potentially addressing that? I'm assuming if you're worried about cameras being planted in your house, finding them. Well, this is where that extra support team is going to come in. That would be informing a friend or a family member to maybe help search the house for you in the areas in which you can't. If you are in a position where you do not have outside resources to help you look for that, so where you don't have connections in that way, and it's just you and this person, I would start to question why you feel like there might be cameras, and start to question if your situation is actually safe. And for me, maybe the guidance could be in getting connected with a mental health clinician to kind of help you walk through safety steps of trying to figure this out. Or once again, contacting law enforcement, but that's a really triggering, can be a very unsafe situation if you're not quite sure. Just because that would be them coming and kind of doing like a search warrant, looking for your house for you. And then that would have to be putting this person in question. And especially if they're a caregiver, that could jeopardize your care. So I would reach out to additional support services. And if you do not have that, it sounds like your situation is very particular, and that connecting with some sort of social worker or mental health clinician might actually be the best next bet to help you kind of brainstorm and problem solve through that. I hope that helped. You're welcome.
Sounds like it was helpful. So if I have a friend that I think is in an abusive relationship, how do I support them? What do I do?
I love that question. Really, really, really good question. This is really hard to be a friend that believes that their friend's in an abusive relationship. I would start by saying, remembering what your place is as the friend. You're not there to fix the problem for them. They have to be in a position and willing to get out of the situation and do it from themselves. If they are not ready for that, then they're not ready for that. And so the most important thing you can do as a friend is to maybe make the observation, hey, I noticed this thing. I want to check in and make sure you're okay. Do not be alarmed if they get defensive. It's just kind of part of the stages of being in that. And just continue to be a support and an unjudgmental ear, because they're more likely to talk to you if you don't make judgments and confide in you. And that's going to be the first step for somebody gaining confidence to leave, is that if they know they have somebody to talk to that doesn't judge them. Once again, this is why I recommend the therapist, because let me remind you, even if you have a disability, but let's say you're not categorized under a protected class of a dependent adult, just because you're in an abusive relationship, I don't have to report that. That's not in my legal responsibility to report it. And so as a therapist, when I have multiple clients right now who are in abusive relationships and in various stages of leaving it. If I sat there and judged them, not too many of them would come to therapy, or told them what to do. So I sit and I listen and I brainstorm and I process. But I have to say, it can be really, really hard as a friend to watch your friend go through that. So make sure you're just checking kind of what's your responsibility as a friend, and being aware of how involved you're getting in it. You don't want to be too involved.
I was muted. So we have a follow-up question. What exactly does it mean with SCI being protected class? Can you?
Yeah. So a little bit earlier in the slide, I talked about dependent adults. So not everybody with a spinal cord injury or disability is a dependent adult, but a handful of them are. And that is if you rely on, because of your particular disability, you rely on the care, the help of somebody else to get your basic care needs met. That can be bathing, using the bathroom, feeding yourself, taking your medication. So any time in which for you to get your basic needs met and it relies on somebody else to do that for you, you are considered a dependent adult. You depend on the care of somebody else. But just because you have a spinal cord injury or disability, that does not make you a dependent adult. But many people with spinal cord injuries or disabilities can be under a dependent adult class. And you can see where the law protects you there, right? Because you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable to people taking advantage of you because you are dependent on some other people to get your basic needs met. And so that's why they're a protected class. I hope that answered the question.
All right, sounds like it did. How do I manage the abuse if I can't leave the abusive relationship right now?
That is a complex question. And one, I'm very sorry that you're in that position. And it is complex and it's heavy and it is something difficult to manage on your own. Well, first of all, to manage it on your own, make sure that you're engaging in self-care. I would also be assessing for your safety first. It's one thing to stay because it's complex, you're not quite able to leave. But if your health or safety really truly is at risk, I might be kind of wanting to reanalyze why you can't leave just yet or what the barriers are. But if you're not quite ready to leave and you don't feel like your safety is in immediate risk, engaging in self-care, self-discovery, anything that's self-esteem boosting. I think the really important part here is having a grip of yourself and your intuition, especially as women. I am a big believer in females' intuition. And I'm watching our time here, Emily. Female intuition and being able to trust that. So if that means that you're doing things for you that allow you to do self-discovery. I love books, quotes, engaging in anything that brings you joy is really important. But I would, once again, I am biased, but I believe I have an educated bias. I would get in contact with a therapist to help you cope with the abusive situation you cannot leave yet.
Thank you for answering that. We have 2 minutes left of the webinar. Does anyone else have any questions that they wanted to ask? Someone asked, where can I buy a cheap recording device? I think maybe that's trying to establish proof of abuse. I think that might be where that question is going.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I'm always a fan of Amazon. I don't know. But I would say, obviously, the internet is probably your best resource there. So Amazon would probably give you a wide variety of that. And once again, make sure if you do plan on recording something that you are being very careful about that, because if the abuser discovers that you're recording, that could put you in a precarious situation. And then also our phones have recording apps on it. But I would be, I would caution doing that, making sure that you're doing that in a safe way and kind of really analyze why you need to do that.
Thank you for answering all our questions.
You're welcome.
All right, so we are gonna wrap up our webinar tonight. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Our upcoming webinars are listed on the screen. They're open to the public. So our very next one is February 9th. We're moving from Tuesday platform to Wednesday platform. Preventative healthcare with Shonda Hilton. And then we have Living with a Long-Term SCI with Ginger Lane, and some of her friends are joining her. And then in the spring, we haven't totally nailed down everything yet, but we are looking into motherhood, pregnancy, and caregiver relationships. Please remember that if you are a woman with a spinal cord injury or disability, we host small groups to discuss the topics from tonight at each of our webinars. So if you are a woman with a spinal cord injury or disability, or if you know anyone, please visit our website to join our small groups. And a recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. You will also receive a copy via email. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and a big thank you to Jenna for being our guest tonight.
Thank you, guys.
Hope everybody has a great night.